go. I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking. I love the family.
Welcome in, everybody. It is DawgNation's Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. That's my theme music each and every week, brought to you by Cortez. Been real. Really appreciate him lending his talent to our show each and every week on the podcast. Pretty cool thing. Guys, we've got a show for everybody tonight. Let's talk about a lot of things. This show, this is what we're going to call it kind of the big tease. We're going to have some big news, kind of interesting news for five-star Georgia target Josh Petty. We're going to discuss the recent new hires for Georgia with Josh Crawford and also the rehire of James Coley. We're going to have a great interview packages, not only with Josh Petty, but Milton High wide receiver C.J. Wiley and Warner Robins defensive end, the Demon, Isaiah Gibson, number 99. Those three guys were also at the Under Armour camp, kind of continuing our series of DawgNation conversations with each of those guys. But to start things off with your Big Five each and every week, welcome in, sit down, pop open your favorite beverage. This is Before the Hedges time on DawgNation, and we're going to start tonight's show with potentially some seismic changes to the recruiting calendar. There are proposed legislation going on in Indianapolis right now. Funny how everything's happening in Indy right now, where the Oversight Committee for NCAA recruiting is looking at some hypotheticals. And what they're doing is it's direct feedback from the college coaches about how December was just a flippin' mess. If you remember, the top 25s came out, the final regular season polls after the conference title games. The next day, the transfer portal window opened. 2 weeks later was early signing day. Well, there's some legislation coming down the pipe now that's kind of going to try to remedy some of that a little bit. And when the NCAA tries to do anything, they get a little heavy-handed and maybe it becomes an overcorrection. But let's take a look at what we're talking about right now. One of these things, guys, I'm going to tell you, it is a little overblown and unnecessary. What they're talking about, this is a tweet story broken by Pete Thamel of ESPN.com. They're meeting this week to discuss calendar changes. Now here, listening in real close is what they're talking about. Late Wednesday in June, the Wednesday following the regular season, that's going to replace the early signing period on the third Wednesday of December, and then the first Wednesday in February. Now let's take a look at that. Let's kind of dial in that a little bit more. You see what they're trying to do? It's going to be a 3 or 7 day calendar period beginning the last weekend Wednesday of June. The second period is a 3 to 7 calendar day period beginning the Wednesday following the last FBS regular season game. Got a problem with that one. Got a problem with the first one as well. Not as big a problem as the second one. And then you've got a regular NIL period, which is National Letter of Intent period, which is the first Wednesday in February through April the 4th. That's kind of April the 1st. That's kind of the traditional period there. That's not much of a change. But what they're trying to do, and it is a reflection of the new basically all the recruiting tries to take place, unless you're a big shot, unless you're a really good football player, they're going to try and get the recruiting done between April and July. Really, the whole month of June now is official visit season. The whole month of July is turned into commitment season. July is a dead period except for the last weekend in July where visitors can come out. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to see them take some of these changes and just kind of move it in a better direction. I think you should have one signing period, and that should be maybe late July, right before the start of the high school season. I like the way that feels right there. And then you should have the one, maybe make that one right after the conference title games where guys can get in early before the transfer portal period opens up. So, and folks, it's only going to get more complicated because you're going to have teams that are alive in the 12-team playoff. Can you imagine the Armageddon it would be for some coaches to say, to heck with this, if they're trying to win playoff games and they're hosting playoff games while they're trying to lock down recruits? Remember how Georgia had to rally in the last 2 weeks for KJ Bolden? And while at the same time looking into the transfer portal, and not only that, trying to prevent and retain their players from the portal. Here's what I think you need to do. You need to give an out clause to that early signing period. Let them do it before their senior years, because the guys that are done, they can be done. They can concentrate on senior year. College coaches don't have to worry about continuing to call them 2 or 3 times. So you're seeing a lot, 2 or 3 times per week. So you're seeing a lot of kind of radical changes to the calendar. We've seen recently where they've abolished the cookie cakes, where you can't have the cookie cake and all the candy and Powerades and treats inside your hotel room anymore. It gotten to the point where some recruiting staffs would have to book the rooms a day in advance prior to when the recruit arrived, just so they can get the recruits ready. You can only take the photo shoot now in official gear on your official visit. That's saving a lot of manpower in the infrastructure of the recruiting machine. And now you've got this. I think more and more decisions are being made in the summer. Give them the ability to make that decision in the summer, then also give them the ability to make that decision perhaps right after the conference championship games, although that's going to be a wrinkle there with the high school season as well, because just think about the state of Georgia in the GHSA playoffs, for instance. You'd have guys committing and signing during the second period now while they're still trying to win a GHSA state title. I know a lot of high school coaches aren't going to like that distraction in their prep week. Maybe that's the third or fourth round of the GSA bracket right there. So it's not perfect. All those models, all those scenarios, you got to give them an out clause. And the out clause would be if your head coach moves on or if your position coach moves on, something changes with the situation you had an early signing to, then the young men, the athletes would also have the ability to opt out of their previous commitment as well. That's what I think is happening there. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that recruiting calendar, how it would change some things. I think it would make things a lot easier. I think it would condense the recruiting period. It would kind of get rid of the crossover between conference championships and travel for college football playoff games, prep for college football playoff games, and also that magnificent transfer portal season that happens in December and January now. Interesting to see the NCAA trying to do something about that. That's because there was so much feedback about how the system is breaking, and it was at a crisis point with everything that was going on last December, and that was before the college football playoff gets added to the gumbo right there. So they got a lot of stuff to fix. It's good that they're being proactive and trying to fix it before the 2024 seasons arrive. All right, that's number one on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Welcome in. Glad you guys are hanging out, guys. Go hit up your local Kroger each and every week. They got what you want. They got what you need. You're going to start to see Easter baskets and stuff like that showing up in the shopping aisles there. You know your local Kroger will have it all right there. Next up on Before the Hedges, let's put up two fingers right here on Before the Hedges. Our next segment we're going to talk about is the defensive end, the in-state defensive end that Georgia really likes. I'm talking about in-state edge Isaiah Gibson at Warner Robins. You're going to see an interview here with him. He's going to mention the name Victor a lot. He's talking about Vic Burley right there. Vic Burley was a former Warner Robins defensive end that he played with, who's now at Clemson. That's one of the two official visits that Gibson has set up. He's got it for the early part of June and late May there with Isaiah Gibson. Gibson's talking all things dogs. I want you to check out his outfit and his gear. You want to hear from the number 2 edge in the country right now, according to On3.com, then it's time to hear from Isaiah Gibson here on Before the Hedges. Isaiah, what sticks out to you about Georgia and how they're recruiting you?
I would say mostly the coaching staff and how they run the program for sure.
Has it changed the way they maybe amped up their recruitment in you, or has it been constant, or is it jacked up a little bit?
I feel like Georgia's the top priority. They're the top dog, so they're going to recruit the top people, and I feel like I'm one of the top people regardless.
What do they say they want you? What do they value in your game?
They mostly value my edge rushing, my bend, my speed for sure.
What does Uzo tell you? What does Uzo talk to you about? What's that relationship like with Coach Deribe?
It's amazing. So I talked to Coach Deribe before I came today. You know what I'm saying? I've always talked to Coach Scott, but this is my first year actually talking to Coach Deribe. Coach Deribe, he even came to my school after I visited in January. So I feel like, you know what I'm saying? Me and Coach Deribe have a very tight relationship. So he just went on a vacation to Miami with his wife and stuff. So we talked about that too. So it was just all good about relationships. You got the slides, you wore the jacket. Is you trying to send a message? I got a book bag too. Book bag too, huh? Why'd you get all geared up today for that? Hey, you know what I'm saying?
Is that showing respect for the way they're recruiting you a little bit?
For sure. It got to. That's respect.
So when you think of the Dogs and the way they're recruiting you, what comes to mind? What's the words that come to mind?
Dog, greatness, league bound.
Football's hard, man. I want to ask you a human being question because you're more than a tool to win a football game. Why do you play, man? When it gets hard, what do you dig deep and find?
I honestly play I want to say this I would say I want to make a name for myself because I had good people around me. You know what I'm saying? For my ninth grade year, we had an amazing D-line our my ninth grade year. You know what I'm saying? Vic has been also like a great role model for me. You know what I'm saying? I just want to because everybody knows Vic, but now everybody's starting to know me. I'm just trying to leave a name for myself. You know what I'm saying? And I also want to have my mom. I want to have my mom sitting on the pallet somewhere. So, and that's football really takes me my mind away from everything. So, yeah.
Isaiah, what was your height and weight today? What did they have you at?
They had me at 6'1.5", 238. I recently dropped because I got really sick. I had food poisoning, so I got to drop the weight. But I'm gonna get it back next 2 weeks.
Where's a normal playing weight for you?
255, 260.
Said any officials yet? What have you figured out yet?
I know I'm going to Clemson for sure. The first week of June, and I'm gonna try to go to Georgia the second or third week, and I know I'm going to Oklahoma, Oregon the fourth week.
Isaiah, thanks, man.
For sure.
Appreciate you. Good stuff there from Isaiah Gibson. Couple takeaways from that. A few takeaways, actually. First of all, tell you how hard it is to be a life of a college coach. He's talking about Chidera Uzo-Diribe right there, the Georgia outside linebackers coach, kind of also known as the Wolfpack coach there in Athens. And he's on a vacation in Miami with his wife, and he is still calling recruits. Can you guys imagine how that goes? I know how that would go with my lovely bride. It'd be like, all right, honey, I'm going to go to the ice machine and get some ice. I'm going to get some snacks. I'm going to take a quick walk, get my steps in. Meanwhile, you say, I'm going to go down and get on the treadmill. I'm going to get on the bike. Meanwhile, you're calling a number 2 edge in the country, a guy that had, I believe he had 17 sacks last year as a junior. And get this, an impressive 51 quarterback pressures there. That's a guy. Another interesting little thing about Isaiah, you saw him wearing the gear. He had a backpack. He had slides. He had a Georgia pullover on. So he wanted to represent. He wanted to show respect to Georgia for how they're recruiting him. Hear what he said there? When he thinks of Georgia, he thinks of greatness. He thinks of league bound. He's got official visits set. I mentioned this earlier in our kind of prelude to the package. He's going to see Clemson May 31st, June 2nd. His former high school teammate Vic Burley at Warner Robins went to Clemson, so Clemson's really in it. Georgia's really in it. He set up Georgia for the second weekend of June, and then he's going to see Oregon and Oklahoma also. Kind of ballpark that around the third, fourth week of June right there for Isaiah. Very interesting. There's a lot of edge targets Georgia likes. There's Darren Kennebong out of Hillside, New Jersey. We'll talk about him a little bit later. You've got Jared Smith. You saw him last week on Hedges. You've got Zion Grady. You saw him last week on Hedges. And it's kind of interesting. I think the recruiting services kind of got this right. What Gibson showed us, and I'm just going to speak purely opinion-based as a scout here, as a talent person right there. Gibson showed me a little bit more. He was a little bit more impressive than Grady and Smith were at the Under Armour camp. And you see On 3 actually moved him up to the nation's number 2 edge. Zion Grady, you saw his overall rankings in the composites drop a little bit. The same thing for Jared Smith. So you see how Gibson articulated that Georgia has made him feel like a priority for a while and that Georgia's the top dog. Interesting how Georgia had been talking, he'd mostly been talking to Travion Scott, defensive end, defensive line type guy during his recruitment. But recently, Georgia has transitioned him to Chidera Uzo-Diribe, which is a big sign that they think he can play out there on the edge, be a big pass rush threat for the Dogs as well. So different, it's a different switch, but that's an upside for Isaiah because it changes the way they value him. He's an 84-inch wingspan, big wingspan, one of those California condors like coming off the edge, screaming off the edge. 51 pressures. Warner Robins does not play cupcakes down there in middle Georgia. So if you can get 51 pressures at Warner Robins and 17 sacks, you're doing something. I love this stat. His catapult number was tracked this year GPS-wise in a game at 18.6 miles per hour. That's pretty good for a 6'4" plus 255-pound edge defensive end prospect right there. So that right there, guys, that was number 2, our first DawgNation conversation. That was with Isaiah Gibson. Now let's move on to number 3 in our show, in our big 3 right now. And we want to talk wide receivers. We want to talk about a young man at Milton High School. I'm going to set this up for you. He had 68 catches, 1,470 yards, 14 touchdowns for the 7A state champions at Milton High School. That was his first season there with the Eagles. He was coached by the great Terrence Edwards. And you've got a lot of stuff to like about him. The DawgNation story that's going to come out of this tomorrow, you're going to read about work ethic. You're going to read about respect. But also he has an SEC and NFL bloodline. Everybody remember Chuck Wiley, the former LSU Bengal Tiger, former NFL Atlanta Falcon, I believe. Well, that C.J. Wiley's his son. His mom was also a track athlete at LSU. So you've got a good DNA, good background there. You want to learn more about C.J. Wiley, a guy that James Coley has already quickly reached out to since he became the wide receivers coach again at the University of Georgia. I want you to come for the thoughts and the feedback from C.J. Wiley on Georgia, but I also want you to watch his highlight tape that's all over this package right here. C.J. Wiley, you know what he does, man? He catches touchdowns and big-time explosive touchdowns. They call him C4 for a reason. That's because that young man is explosive. Check it out right now on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. C.J. Wiley, Milton High School. Does a guy, a receiver like you, remember your stats? 67 catches, 1,470 yards, 14 touchdowns. You got to remember some of that stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
What do those numbers say about you?
I mean, I wouldn't say like they were great, because I could still like do better and work on some stuff. But yeah, I still like work to improve. But those numbers were pretty good that season.
Did you have goals set that high for the season? Did you think if I'd have told you before your junior year that you were going to go that hard?
Yes, sir. I did have some goals set before that year, and I reached them.
Pretty good. Terrence Edwards, how much of a difference has he made in your game?
He made a real big difference. When I first came here, he like really developed me to where I am right now. So yeah.
CJ, you're one of the top receivers in the state of Georgia. I think you're still top 25 in the country, maybe. Does a guy like you pay attention to rankings at all? Does it motivate you? Do you care? Do you notice it? Like, what sort of role do those play in your head at all?
Rankings, they don't really mean anything to me, because at the end of the day, I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of doing. So yeah, they don't really matter to me.
Like, what are you looking for in the right school?
I want like a school that I can get a good major in, a coach that can develop me on and out the field, a good relationship with the coaches and the players, and a winning team.
Your dad played college football at LSU. How is that a blessing? Is that a burden? Is that helpful advice from somebody that's played at the highest level? How do you use that?
It's helpful advice, because he can like help me on some things, or like tell me what to do, like what things I got to do to get to the next level. So yeah.
What do you feel? How do you feel about Georgia? How do you feel about the way Georgia's recruiting you? How are they recruiting you, and how do you feel about the way they're doing it?
For right now, they're recruiting me pretty hard right now. I got a good relationship with most of the coaches, and yeah.
So I think Coach Smart and Coach BMAC came by your school. Yeah. They invited you to junior day, and they told you they want you. Like, why do they want you? Like, what do they see in your game that can help the Bulldogs win?
I mean, really, they said I really check in all the boxes that they have for me, so yeah.
What do you like best about Georgia, the opportunity you have to play there?
They're a winning team. They win.
You visited junior day with Travis Smith Jr. at Westlake. You know Ethan Barbour pretty well. You guys used to play together at Alpharetta. What would it be like if you guys all were together, man? Would that be like very hard for a defensive coordinator to deal with? Like, have you thought about it yet? Like maybe all you guys playing together?
Yes, sir. That would be probably unstoppable, because you got two big dudes on the outside, a good tight end on the inside.
You got a good Ethan story. You've played with him for a long time. What do people need to know about Ethan? What kind of dude is he?
He a dog.
Is he?
Sir.
Why you say that? You said, matter of fact, like he's a dog.
I played with him in middle school. He a dog, yeah.
What is Georgia getting in him? And you say dog, is that just a physical fighter that loves to make plays and will mix it up and will do inside drill and one-on-ones too?
Physical fighter. He can do one-on-ones. So, yeah.
What was your favorite part of the Georgia Junior Day visit?
Probably talking with Coach Smart at the basketball game. We got to talk and taking pictures.
What did Coach Smart say?
He was just talking about how he wants you, how you feel like filling all the boxes, and how like watch your game from last year and like your growth and develop from this year. So yeah.
How will you be better in 2024?
I'm gonna keep training. I'm running track right now, so that'll get me faster. I'm in the weight room with Coach Woods, so it'll get me stronger. So yeah.
What distances do you run? 200, 400?
I'm a 1 and 2. I run the relays too, 4x1, 4x2, 4x4, sometimes 4x4.
Is the goal to get underneath, to get a 10 in front of your time this year?
Yes, sir. I'm going for 10.5, low 21, and a 47 in the 400.
Wow. What's your favorite part about playing football? Favorite part of the game?
Probably scoring touchdowns, get to celebrate with teammates, and yeah.
C4. Now, C4 is a type of explosive. Obviously, C is your first name, but 4 is your jersey number. Where does that come from? Have people called you C4 for a while?
Actually, Ethan gave it that nickname in middle school, like 6th, 7th grade. So, yeah, I just went by C4.
Good job, Ethan Barbour. That kid's a character.
Yeah.
CJ Wiley, man, certainly appreciate your time. Certainly appreciate you hanging out with me today.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Isn't that funny? I tell you what, some might think we have a lot of extensive staging for our interviews sometime. I'm not kidding you. I started talking to CJ. The state championship trophy for GHSA 7A was right there. So I was like, hold on, let me do that. It'll never get that easy. They just had the state championship trophy sitting on the conference table in the coach's office. That's pretty funny. Where the coaches eat lunch, they were eating lunch right next to the, I guess NHL teams in the Stanley Cup. I think the Milton High staff, they just want to eat some food. They had some king cake out there that was brought in from Louisiana. It really tasted good. Had like a raspberry kind of swirl to it. Man, that was living right there at Milton. Let me tell you a little bit about that. Really cool to see CJ Wiley there. He's running track. He told me that he's one of those things. He's running the 100, the 200, a lot of relays. So far, he's 22.5 in the 200 and a 50.6 in the 400. Just getting started. Those times are going to drop. The more he runs, the warmer it gets. But this is a stat. A lot of things to love about CJ Wiley. It sounds like the Dogs are already back in it. Coley reached out and told him he's going to continue to recruit him and he's going to build that connection. He'd already spoken to him before. Coley had been recruiting some of his teammates. His former Milton High teammate was at one time committed to Texas A&M before eventually signing with South Carolina. But this is what I like about CJ Wiley. He moves over from Alpharetta, takes a little bit. Look at this. I went through his stat chart, his sheet, his production for last year. He went through the first 7 games of his junior year, never having a 100-yard game. Now, they got a lot of weapons over there. They probably got 3 Division I wide receivers there. They ever had one that went on to South Carolina. They got a quarterback in Luke Nickel that's committed to Miami. But you saw those highlights. I'm going to tell you, this is how C.J. Wiley went bonkers. Look at this. Week 8, 254 yards receiving. Week 9, 183. Week 10, 90. Week 11, 97. Week 12, 174. Week 13, 46. Week 14, 136. And week 15, 45. That tells me that a lot of smart coaches saw that game film and saw how Milton was winning games and putting teams away in the playoffs and in the second season. And they worked on some brackets. They worked on some over-the-tops. They got their best corner over to deal with C.J. Wiley and his other teammates. They're benefited in a state championship season there for C.J. Wiley. NFL bloodline, LSU father bloodline as well. Sounds like the Georgia Bulldogs have made him feel like a priority. Did you hear he talked about the connection he has with Ethan Barbour, his former high school teammate, the guy that gave him that C4 nickname, and then also how much he would like to play with Travis Smith Jr. as well. Both Travis, as you've seen on the show recently, recent interviews, and C.J. Wiley are students, pupils of the great Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. So really cool. I wanted to give you guys a good look, a good listen to another priority Georgia wide receiver target for the 2025 class here on Before the Hedges. Next up, we got another DawgNation conversation. You want to talk? You want to listen in and learn from a 5-star? Let's do that right now. But first, let me set this up. Josh Petty was on his way to winning the state title in wrestling. He suffered an avulsion fracture in his hip in the middle. He was ahead on points, and he suffered a hip fracture Very painful. He said on a scale of 1 to 10, it was probably an 8. One of the most painful sports injuries he'd ever experienced. And he lost the state title. Bad news there. Good news there is a hip avulsion fracture. Sounds pretty bad. He's only going to be out about 6 to 8 weeks. He'll be ready to go for spring practice. The other thing he's got to do is he's got to put on weight. He was, obviously wrestling. You drop a lot of weight to wrestle. He was down to 255. So now he is on a good gosh almighty Joe Friday. That's the only way I can say it. He has got a granddaddy long legs type nutrition plan ahead of him. The goal is to put on 30 pounds by the fall, get up to 285. That's where the college coaches want to see him. And he's going to do so by ingesting, and I guess that's the only way to describe it, about 400 grams of protein per day and a almost 7,000 per day calorie diet. It's really hard to get in a caloric deficit when you're going over 7,000, 6,500 calories per day. Josh Petty, you want to know how he feels about the Dogs? You want to know about Tennessee, which was his dream school growing up, and Auburn. You want to know about all those things? Of course you do. That's what Before the Hedges brought to you, Kroger, is all about. Let's listen to Josh Petty right now on Hedges. Josh Petty, Fellowship Christian, fresh off a silver medal performance.
Yes,
Number
sir.
2 in the state in Class 2A, Fellowship Christian. Your junior year on the mat didn't end the way you wanted it to. Can you briefly describe, I guess you got a bad taste in your mouth, but there's some good news, I guess a little bit at the end of the rainbow there?
Yes, sir. So sadly, I injury forfeited while up on points in my final match in wrestling. I avulsion fractured my hip, and I'll be out for 6 to 8 weeks. But, hey, it's going to happen. Injuries are part of football. That's what life is, and so I've just got to come back better.
I think you've got an interesting story about how you're going to get to 285, hopefully, by your senior year.
Yes, sir.
That means 25, 30 pounds maybe or something like that. How are you going to do it? Sounds like you got a very, very laid out plan and philosophy about how to do it.
I think it starts right there with counting your calories. As soon as in the season I try to, but as soon as the off season starts, I'm really counting my calories, digging down on what I'm eating, forcing more food in my body, higher protein intakes, protein shakes at night, just trying to keep and stack weight on.
You've got an impressive goal. A mathematician might enjoy your goal. 400 grams of protein, 350 grams of protein, 6,000, 6,500, 7,000 calories a day. How does one go about doing that? You must slug back 3 protein shakes a day.
Yeah. I mean, there's a protein shake in the morning. There's a protein shake with lunch. There's a protein shake with lunch before dinner. And then there's a nightly protein shake that you take. And that's a lot of calories. That one, big calories, big protein, a lot of stuff in that.
Why do the coaches tell you they want you? When they look at your film and they say, you'd be great for us because of X, Y, and Z, what do they say?
So one of the big points is my length in my arms. I have 84-inch reach, and I have very long arms. I move my feet very quick. I keep up with guys well. Academics, player development, spiritual development, and a coach that I can get along with. Yes, sir. It's been great. They started recruiting me early on. I believe they were about my 13th offer. And it's been awesome. Growing up, you always hear about the Bulldogs. They'd won the back-to-back national championships. So, of course, the first part, receiving that offer felt great. And then keeping up connections, knowing that they're a guy that want me to play for them. And the way they recruit has been really awesome. This recruiting process has been special with them for sure. It's just how well they do it. Coach Smart's out there. He's an active coach. He's laying into everybody. He's making sure that, he wants those guys to get better. And I can see why they're winning national championships.
Is the way they win and they develop, are those the biggest things that stick out to you about Georgia?
Yeah, I'd probably say. Yes, sir. Auburn's a great school. Their O-line coach right there, he sticks out to me a lot. He's built a great relationship with me. And he's very good at what he does. And I've seen, his history as well as the people at Auburn. They seem like they really care, and they're really awesome around there.
How about Rocky Top?
Rocky Top, I grew up a Tennessee fan, actually. So,
wow.
that's special about them. But just what they've been doing with that offense, I mean, that's been really sticking out to me. I've seen, how successful they've been and how they've been doing it.
Josh, you're a sharp and analytical kid. What's something about the recruiting process that most folks don't get or they wouldn't understand until they're in the middle of it like you are?
You got to see through it sometimes. Coaches are going to say a lot of things. They're going to say everything they want and can to get you there. But talking to the players and really looking into the school and seeing, what those facts mean and if those facts are actually true, it's really crucial. Wrestling's great. I recommend every young football player to do it. First of all, with leverage, understanding, especially with linemen, hand fighting, learning to be aggressive with your hands, learning to place them hard. And, it's been good, as well as, like, movement and, learning how to bend, stay physical, stuff like that.
Pretty cool stuff there. So Josh Petty, 5-star offensive tackle. I think he's the number 3 offensive tackle in the country. Kind of similar storyline there with David Sanders Jr. at Providence Day in Charlotte, the number 1 offensive tackle in the class. And they both got to throw on some weight. Like, Georgia's kind of got a habit of taking that 350-pound guy, 355-pound guy, getting them down to 320, 330 to play. But they've done it before. They've done it with guys like, even a guy like Dylan Fairchild, who also wrestled to play interior offensive line. But, the name that kind of sticks out there is Broderick Jones. I think of Broderick Jones a lot when I try to evaluate Josh Petty and also David Sanders Jr. because Broderick was about 260, 270 in his junior year as well. He played a lot of basketball, shot a lot of threes, threw down a lot. So he was a guy that when he got to Georgia got him up to 320 by the time he was finally playing. That they'll pack that calories on. And, folks, we got to talk about this. I know I started in football mode and everything else like that, but can you imagine, like, as most of men of a certain age, fathers trying to avoid the dad bod, we try to get that protein shake, and we try to get, I've got a shake where I can get like 32 grams of protein in one shake, and that's a meal replacement for sure. And the thought of having to do that 10 times in the day, 12 times in the day, to get to 400 grams of protein, 350 to 400, it's unfathomable. And can you imagine getting to 7,000 calories in a day? Like, that would be just like constantly. I mean, people are going to say, I'm just going to go wolf down 12 donuts from Krispy Kreme, but you can't do that. And, I've never heard of this concept before, but if we had to rewind the tape there on Josh Petty, did you hear him how we would say you got your lunch and then you got your second lunch before dinner and then you got your dinner, which includes your protein shake at night? Second lunches, I guess you're eating like a Georgia offensive lineman target when you're having your second lunch in the afternoon. That's pretty cool stuff there. Always good to talk to Josh Petty. Really rare, big-time Power 2 college football prospect out of Fellowship Christian in Roswell. Gets great grades, 4.1 GPA. His mom's actually from Poland. His dad played D2 football at, I believe, Morehead State, and then he went to Morehouse for grad school. So really cool stuff there with Josh Petty. Really analytical kid, really sharp kid. And, you wouldn't know he had a hip avulsion fracture because he had like a little cane. He had like a one brace type thing, but he was already off that. He was kind of walking around in our interview, and it's like, man, to be like 2 weeks, 10 days, 8 days outside of a hip fracture, doing pretty good right there. Really cool stuff there with Josh Petty. I always thankful to him for his time and also for Coach John Thompson at Fellowship Christian as well. Good folks over there. Last but not least, 5 fingers up. Kind of what I kind of thought, was kind of one of the bigger stories. Georgia has never had to replace a running backs coach and a wide receivers coach in the month of February like they've done recently, replacing the jobs for BMAC to the NFL and Dell McGee to Georgia State. Big losses there, but really good pass for those coaches, those, highly respected young men, highly respected by the young men across the state. And the coaches across the state as well for the way they do their job and not only how they do the job, but the way they go about it. Really cool there. And now Georgia, Georgia is faced with the prospect of, filling those roles right now. And I think right now it's going to be harder for Josh Crawford. And I mean that not just because James Coley has done this before, has recruited this level for Georgia, knows how to do it, knows what the coaching staff, knows what Kirby wants. it's because Crawford's got, I mean, guys, Dell just knew how to cook on the recruiting trail. I'll give a couple examples. We're going to talk about them on the top targets. I'm moving one name off the top targets. I believe I had him on off the list because I think it will just be about impossible for Georgia to rally to come from maybe third or fourth right now with Keelan, Henderson, the A-train, Alvin Henderson out of Elba, Alabama. I think Georgia and the relationship with Dell had been cooking on that relationship for over a year, and he's still kind of like Florida State, still kind of like in-state Auburn, a little bit better. And I think it's going to be impossible for Josh Crawford to come in and win that one. And then the other thing you got to think about, a guy that most of the recruiting industry, we profiled him a couple weeks ago on Before the Hedges, had a Kylan Deere going to Ole Miss. But Dell had been cooking there for as well. He'd been sending Bible verses. He'd been building a relationship for well over a year. And for Josh Crawford to come in and kind of replace that in a short cycle for him at least, where he doesn't have the time he needed to kind of build a relationship like that. Now, sure, you could say he's going to have at least 5 or 6 months, depending on what the NCAA does with that early signing date. But it's going to be really hard to make that up the way Dell recruited, especially when Georgia just signed 3 All-American running backs a year ago, and they've already got 1 running back commitment in Bo Walker as well. So it's going to be really hard for Josh Crawford to have a year where he just goes bonkers on the trail and everybody goes, all right, that was your huge home run there. I think, Coley's going to do what Coley does, but Coley's going to have the disadvantage of the best players at wide receiver now. There are extra incentives and inducements that are necessary. I mean, that might be Coley's reaction when he sees some of those numbers that some of the nation's top wide receivers are getting now to play that position. And Georgia I don't think they will play that game with NIL, especially with a high school wide receiver. Georgia's kind of trajectory now is they go get transfer portal receivers that are plug and play that have already shown that they could play at a high level of football in the SEC or in another conference like, Colby Young with the ACC moving forward as well. So interesting to see Georgia replace both of those. I'm going to give them incredible acumen for the way they recruit, their relationships across the state. I just feel like it's going to be a little bit harder for both of those guys to make an impact, especially for different reasons. I think Coley would be well served if he can sign a guy like Travis Smith Jr. Sounds like things are going great there. And then also C.J. Wiley, 2 really good in-state wide receivers when the Peach State normally doesn't provide that level of receiver talent inside the borders of the state of Georgia. I think that'll be helpful. I think those guys are also guys that won't command that high top dollar there for their services coming in out of high school from collectives and everything else like that. Want to kind of take that thought, and we always are all about engagement here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger, and that leads us to our question of the week. My question of the week for you guys is: you've heard me talk about Coley, you've heard me talk about Josh Crawford, and already I've heard a lot of great things about Josh Crawford from some of the recruits that he's already been talking to. But my question is this: for you guys, which one of those two do you think, which new UGA assistant will put together the best position class in 2025? You can go, I guess you can kind of look in a lot of ways. You could also go Travaris Robinson. You got to include T-Rob in there as well. You got to include Dante Williams in there as well. Or you can go with those new guys we just discussed. You could go with James Coley or Josh Crawford of the new Georgia assistants. Remember, Georgia turned over 4 assistant coaching slots here in since the 2023 season ended. Which one of new UGA assistant do you think will put together the best position class out of the new guys in the class of 2025? Anybody got an opinion? Anybody got a take? Love to see those in the comment section here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Next up, guys, that was your big 5. We put those 5 to bed. Now let's move on to what we call, I think this week we called it the mac and cheese of our recruiting menu. Each and every week you got a stable, you got a stock. This is the stuff that you see each and every week. Checking out the class breakdown gives me a chance to just give you the big picture of the class, but also kind of really quickly keep you up to date with everything that's going on there. Bo Walker, guys, you didn't know this. Bo knows baseball. Bo was a baseball player at Cedar Grove High School as well, and he shared some video on social media this week of him actually jacking a few balls trying to get high trajectory coming out of the box. You know, Bo played baseball. Bo Walker hits from the right side for Cedar Grove. Like I said earlier, I think he loves Georgia. He picked Georgia because he chose the school, not the coach, even though he really loved Del McGee. I think that commitment is pretty solid right there. Elias Williams and Ethan Barbour. We're going to have something coming up on Elias Williams on DawgNation.com in a couple of days as well. Just some reaction. I don't think we've done a proper job in terms of making sure you guys out there know what a find Elias Williams is for Todd Hartley in the class of 2025. We talk about the man Ethan Barbour all the time. C.J. Wiley, his former high school teammate at Alpharetta, just simply called him a dog. Way he gets after it, physical fighter, way he got things done. Ethan Barbour had always been that way. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball there, Georgia still has just 2 commitments there. Justice Terry. It's funny, guys, I've been making the case for the last couple of weeks after seeing Justice Terry at the Under Armour camp that he's probably no worse than the number 2, number 3 prospect in the country walking. Even if the ranking services don't reflect that yet, Justice can just be that good in the class of 2025 in Athens. We had him on our show last week. He discussed how he's still really solid with Georgia. What more could he ask for? But he's going to take his visits. I think Justice Terry would be a guy. Let's have some fun here. I'm going to see if I can kind of have a little fun here with our boilerplate stuff each week. If I had to look at these 5 commitments right now, the 5 that I think would sign during a new early period, I think Bo Walker would. I think Justice Terry would. I think Perlotti would have some intrigue and probably want to take a couple more visits and kind of extend that out a little bit more. I think Elias Williams might wait, and I know Barbour would probably go ahead and sign with the Dogs. So just thinking, shooting from the hip right there, we were talking about the early signing period right there for Georgia and how that might change, how there might be a new early signing period in late June or early July. Kind of like late July is the best, right before August hits, and a lot of high school prospects shift their entire focus towards their senior years. That, to me, would be a very good time to do it. But pretty interesting. Georgia's got 5 commits right now, and I think at least 3 of them would sign during an early period with the Dogs as well right there, looking at the 2025 class. Where does this class shape up nationally right now? Right now, the Dogs are number 8 nationally. If you guys want a snapshot of kind of who's doing well, I try to do that every once in a while here because everybody's used to hearing me say Georgia's number 1 in the country, and nobody really has a chance of catching them. Georgia had the number 1 class in the country for a while. For this cycle, they had a couple of decommitments that dropped them down to number 8. They've kind of been there for a while. The number 1 class in the country right now is held by Notre Dame. They've got a lot of commitments already that kind of beefs up their cumulative score right there. And then you've got LSU number 2. LSU's doing great, by the way. LSU has 3 5-stars, and that's a banner year for LSU fans to kind of flex about. But Georgia just already has 2 out of their 5 commitments, and it's really not a banner year at all for Georgia. Kind of pedestrian right now so far, and they have almost as many 5-stars committed as a really great trending, surging class right now at LSU. LSU is really hitting home in the boot state really well. I believe out of the top 10 prospects in the state of Louisiana, LSU already has commitments from 7. So that's what LSU does when it's building together another powerhouse team. Georgia's all of their commitments right now are also on that same topic. From the Peach State, 3 of them on offense, 2 of them are on defense. All 5 of them are in the SEC footprint, and they have 3 top 100 commits right there. Let's move forward from the snapshot, and let's take a look at the top targets. One of the things we try to do is we try to update it. Now, we mentioned earlier about running backs and no Del McGee. To tell you how big I think that was for Akylan Deer here in the Dogs, I had him number 7 last week, but the loss of Del McGee almost drops him off the top early targets list right now. I think Ole Miss probably becomes the team to beat. Also interesting to see how his national ranking, after he showed out at the Under Armour camp, moved him up to the number 2 back in the country, I believe, for On 3 as well. You kind of see these guys right here, Jared Smith, Zion Grady, Darren and Kinnebon. Let's talk about Darren a little bit out of Hillside, New Jersey. He has got 3 unofficial visits set, and he is going to take his unofficial visit to Georgia, and he's going to have a wraparound unofficial right around G-Day after he sees a couple of other schools. I believe Penn State was one of those. And Darren already came out of his last visit to UGA calling Georgia his leader. And you add it together with his official visit, he's going to give Georgia as well. And that's three visits he's going to give Georgia in the first half of 2024. Georgia's already his leader, and he's going to take an unofficial visit around G-Day, and then he's going to come back in, I believe, early June, late May for his official visit for the Dogs. So kind of hard to put together a trending type recruit there than Darren right there out of New Jersey. That was really – Georgia really got in on the ball there thanks to Fran Brown as well. You heard from Isaiah Gibson right there. Really sounds like the team's there. He's going to give NC State a look, but it sounds like Oklahoma, Oregon, Georgia, Clemson are the teams to watch there. Those are the official visits. He's got Matt Zellers. And let's talk a little bit about Matt, because Matt recently saw his rankings kind of skyrocket after everybody finally, I guess, kind of downloaded his huddle film and took a look at it. Matt Zellers is now a 5-star on On3.com, and he's actually rated on their industry ranking and on some composites higher than Juju Lewis. That's how good that junior tape was for Matt Zellers out of Metro Northern Pennsylvania right there. You heard from Josh Petty earlier in the show. If you missed it, I encourage you to go back to it. It's not often we can talk about 400 grams of protein per day and 7,000 calories, but we have that with Josh Petty, who's only going to miss about 6 to 8 weeks after suffering a hip fracture as well during the finals of the state tournament. That's number 8 through 14. Let's take a look at 1 through 7 looks like here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Julian Lewis, the USC commitment right there. He's going to visit Georgia. He's going to visit Colorado, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, and USC, I believe, in the months of March and April. I've been told that those are all unofficial visits there for Julian. Let's see where this thing goes there with Juju in Georgia. Obviously, reclassified. He's going to be 16 years of age most of the season. He'll turn 17. He'll turn 17 in the month of in the middle of his new senior year, which was his junior year there. Juan Gaston Jr., Georgia's getting his first official. Tennessee, Oregon, and the other schools he's looking at hard there. South Carolina is also going to get an official. Cortez Smith, the easiest, closest thing to say is I've thought that Cortez Smith can be like another Cedric Von Pron Granger for a very long time, probably since early sophomore year after I saw him as a 13-year-old starting against Marietta High for Parkview High School. Travis Smith Jr., he said Coley reached out to him. We had a story about that on DawgNation.com and said he was the priority a wide receiver for Coley. He wants him bad in the class. It sounds like Travis told me that he knows Coach Coley will be great for the offense in Athens. Zayden Walker, the 5-star linebacker. Miami is the school you hear with him, but Georgia has really been recruiting him hard for a very long time. Elijah Griffin going to take another visit back to Georgia, I believe, next month as well to see the Dogs at the start of their spring practice. And David Sanders Jr. out of Providence Day in Charlotte rounds out the group right there. David is a remarkable prospect. We've discussed his wares a lot here on Before the Hedges as well. Still holding on as the number 1 offensive tackle in the country and also the number 1 top early target for Georgia for 2025. Give us about another month and we can shed that top early targets right now. And now, last week our show was so busy, we didn't get a chance to go to just off the list. And to me, those are the guys that you'll find. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we're going to show about 10 names here. Don't be surprised if 3 or 4 of these names at least don't wind up Bulldogs when all's said and done. Anquan Newboy Fegans out of Thompson High School, interesting there. Bryce Davis, really that decision I think is going to come down to Clemson, Georgia, and North Carolina. Those are the officials he's had set right there. Another edge. You talk about the names right there for Georgia at edge. You got to include Bryce Davis in there as well. One of the 4 or 5 targets that Georgia really likes there for Coach Uzo Deribe. I'd look for them to get maybe 2 of those 5. I want to stop on this name right here, Dante Fulton out of Worth County. Now, you got to know your Georgia High School Association brackets. You got to know Georgia high school football to know where Sylvester, Georgia's at. Dante Big Play Fulton. He has offers. He has no rankings. He has no stars, but he has a helicopter. And what I mean by that, meaning a helicopter, is Kirby Smart landed the helicopter at Worth County High School. He hears from Georgia a lot. He's heard from new Georgia running backs coach Josh Crawford a lot as well. Look at Dante Fulton. He is a super high jumper, a great athlete. I think he's 6'5", 6'6" right now on the high jump. He had incredible stats his last 2 years at Worth County. Again, he is a rising senior. He kind of checks the profile of a Georgia guy. But let me tell you, let's see if I can jump onto my screen and pull up some notes right here. I want to tell you a little bit about Deontay Fulworth. Let's look at what he did the last couple of years in his career. He had last year, love this line right here, 88 catches, 1,283 yards, 16 touchdowns. That was his junior year. Sophomore year, 61 catches, 910 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He has 27 touchdowns right now. He's going to visit Georgia in the month of March. When it happens, I bet that offer comes because it sounds like the guys in the building really love his film. They kind of were telling him, they were bragging about to each other about how good that film looked right there for Dante. Big play Tay Fulton out of Worth County right there. That's a name to watch at receiver. You want to talk about how Georgia wins at receiver? Well, they find a guy like Deontay Fulton in the state of Georgia who's got the films, got the athleticism, can really move as well. We talked about C.J. Wiley earlier in the year. C.J.'s like 6'4", 196. Dante Fulton is not that type of guy. He's about 6 feet, 6'1", about 160, 70 pounds soaking wet, but he can create separation. And you look at his film, we're going to explore that in the coming weeks. His quarterback is literally just throwing the ball to a spot and saying, you know what, I'm just going to chuck it. I know Dante will get there to it. Christian Garrett, Prince Avenue Christian, really like that defensive lineman. Christian Gass out of Eastside High School as well as another edge to look at right there. Got another board here of just off the list. I know we spent a lot of time there on Davis and Fulton, but I want to tell those stories. Ty Jackson right here on 3.com. This is a guy that's been on just off the list for me for probably the last month. He's got Georgia in his top 10. On 3 just reevaluated his film. They kicked the tires on it. They moved him up to the number 1 linebacker in the country. You want to talk about a guy that can cover, a guy that can run around in space and make plays. That's Ty Jackson. And I'm not going to pronounce the hometown right there of Ty Jackson until I'm really sure how I can pronounce it without sounding like an imbecile right now here on Before the Hedges. Usmani Kromah, that's another guy that, man, Georgia's going to find it really hard-pressed to rebuild the relationship there, to kind of come from outside the top 2 maybe with Usmani Kromah right there. Ryan Montgomery is going to keep visiting. He's going to visit Florida. He's going to visit South Carolina again as well after he gets through this high school basketball season. Trying to figure out, Ryan's the type of guy that's probably going to look at the things and go, what's going to happen with Julian? What's going to happen with Matt Zellers? And where would he stack in there with Georgia as well? We had C.J. Wiley on our show earlier today. He had a great DawgNation conversation as well here on Before the Hedges. That's your just off the list. Got to also mention Eric Winters there, really special linebacker as well. Big athlete, big competitor out of Enterprise, Alabama. He's also high school teammates with the 5-star edge, Zion Grady as well. There you go, guys. That has been Before the Hedges. That has been your top targets. Love telling stories like that about a guy like Deontay, big play, Tay Fulton, guys with no offer yet from Georgia, but it really feels like that's coming. It really feels like, phone's ringing right now. Sometimes I got to remember to make sure it stays on silent during a broadcast, but that's what happens when you're working reporter trying to put together a show like this and forgot the silent button. When you remember everything else, I apologize for that disturbance. Speaking of, guys, it has been another Before the Hedges. If you had 400 calories per night, you had second dinner on your Before the Hedges bingo card, you were doing really well. Here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Guys, we laid it out for you. We had 3 more conversations. We had top targets list. Guys, that has been your intel, all of it. I'm Jeff Sentell. We'll see you guys again later on the pages of DawgNation.com as Cortez Real, King James for Real, takes us out.
Let's go, I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking. I love the family atmosphere and the way they handle business. Education is important, trying to reach the next level.